This is the Ielts listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1.
Listen to the conversation between John, who is an accommodation officer for overseas students, and Susan, a Canadian student who wants an apartment, and complete the form. Look at questions 1 to 5 on the form now. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. First, you have another chance to look at questions 1 to 5. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hi, Students' Housing Office. I'm John. Can I help you?
Hi, I hope so. I need an apartment. The sooner the better. My friends suggested I try you guys.
Well, that's what we're here for, the famous Students' Housing Office. By the way, we call apartments flats here. Anyway, let's get started. First, I'll take down a few particulars to put in our database. Hopefully, we'll help you find some digs before term starts.
Some what?
Some digs. That's British slang for rented accommodation.
Oh dear, flats, digs? And I'm an English major.
No problem. But back to business. Okay, family name.
Cartier.
Cartier. Sounds French.
Yeah, my ancestors were French.
Wow. Do you speak French?
I was born and raised in Montreal, so I'm bilingual.
That's great. And your given names?
Susan Marie. That's M-A-R-I-E.
Got it. Nationality? Canadian, I guess.
Right.
And your student number?
CA 04628.
Okay. Got a contact number?
It's 65349087. I'm staying with friends until I find a place of my own.
65349187.
No, 9087.
Got it. What about a mobile phone?
I'll get one later today and tell you the number.
Okay, 653. That's way over the other side of town, right?
Yes, near the railway station. Far too far if I have classes every day.
So you want somewhere closer?
Up to half an hour by bike, and with a bus service if the weather is too bad.
Yeah, I cycle here too. Keeps me fit, and no hassle trying to find a parking space. Do you want to share accommodation or live on your own?
Live alone. I'll be too busy with my studies to bother with roommates.
How much rent do you want to pay?
Around £500 a month.
Look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen to more of the conversation between John and Susan and answer questions 6 to 10.
That's about right, but it won't be very big. Would a bedsitter be okay?
A bedsitter?
More British English for you. It's a single room with cooking facilities. Some are quite nice.
That'll be okay, but I don't want to share a bathroom, and it must be clean, bright, and not by a noisy main road.
Okay, but you've come a bit late. With only 4 days to go before the term starts, we've only got shared accommodation on our files at the moment. But don't worry, we'll do our best.
Oh, I forgot. Does the rent here include utilities?
Usually no. You have to pay the gas, electricity and water yourself.
What about a deposit?
Most landlords want 3 months in advance, which is also a security deposit. And make sure you read the rental contract carefully, especially the small print.
Thanks, I'll do that. Anything else you need to know?
Not at the moment. Make sure you let me know your mobile phone number.
Will do. Anyway, I must go now. I'm meeting some friends in the cafeteria.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Bye for now.
See you.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2.
You are going to hear an introduction to a library by George Martin, who is the head librarian. First look at questions 11 to 16. As you listen to the first part of the talk, answer questions 11 to 16.
Good morning, and welcome to the main library of the University of British Columbia. My name is George Martin, and I'm the head librarian. And happy to give you a brief introduction to our library. I guess I'm qualified. I've been working here since 1961, back in the days when the only electrical or electronic stuff here was the lights. Oh, and the phones, of course. Mechanical typewriters and slide rules then. No fancy laptops and cell phones. Computers? In a library? No way. Everything was on paper. If you needed to find something, you went to the card index. And if that didn't help, you asked one of the staff. And if that didn't work, you told your professor that you couldn't write the essay because the library didn't have the book you needed. My, you students have it so easy nowadays. We've got about 15 computer terminals on each of our 4 floors. If you know the title or the author, then you can find out if we've got it in seconds, and, if we do, where it is. If we haven't got it, then you can find out if the public libraries and other university libraries in Vancouver and Barnaby have it. Now you know that library books are arranged according to the numbers on the back of each book. Does anyone know the name of this numbering system? Right, the Dewey Decimal Classification System, which was invented by Melville Dewey, an American librarian, not John Dewey, the philosopher.
Now look at questions 17 to 20. As the talk continues, answer questions 17 to 20.
In Melville's day, book classification systems were in a real mess, so he decided to do something about it, and around 1876 came up with the system we still use today. Look up there, and you can see a list of basic categories. 000, generalities, which includes all sorts of things, encyclopedias, news media, etc., etc. Then 100, philosophy and psychology. 200, religion. 300, social sciences. And so on up to 900, geography and history. With over 4 million books, actually nearer to 5 million now in our library, we have a lot to thank Melville for. Now, if you look up to your right, you can see the layout of the library. It's very logical. We start down here on the first floor, or the ground floor for our British cousins, with 3 zeros, generalities, and so on up to the 4th floor with all the 800s and 900s. By the way, you won't find books on medicine and dentistry here. They're all over in the medical library, just to the east of the medical school. Now, if you look at the plan of the 2nd floor, you can see we have a CD and DVD library. The music collection covers just about everything that we call serious, from Bach and Beethoven, folk music, blues, early rock and roll, jazz and more. But sorry, no punk, heavy metal, rap or hip-hop yet. For Oriental music like Peking opera, you'll have to go to the Asian Studies Centre or Chinatown. A word about taking books out. The usual lending period is 2 weeks, but a few books in great demand can only be taken out for 2 days. And I suggest you try to return books on time. The fine is $1 a day for the first week and $1 a day thereafter. That's a lot of beer money. One last thing. Your fancy new smart student card is also your library card, and you can also use it to pay at the student cafeteria. So don't lose it, or you'll starve to death without any library books. Okay, I guess that's enough here. Let's move up to the 2nd floor.
That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2. Part 3.
You will hear a discussion between a tutor and an education student called Sandy about the student's dissertation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, Sandy. How have you been getting on with your dissertation?
Fine, and I've been working hard on the various action points we agreed on our last tutorial.
Do you want to talk me through what you've done?
Yeah, sure. Well, we agreed on 3 main targets for me to aim for. The first one was to find out about suitable data analysis software.
Yes.
And what I decided to do was to look through catalogues specialising in IT.
That's a good idea. What did you come up with?
I found the names of 2 promising ones.
Right.
But I also thought it'd be worthwhile talking to a lecturer.
Oh, right. Who did you see?
Jane Prince. Do you know her? She's in the computer centre?
Yes, of course. She's the new head.
Yes, well, she was very helpful.
Oh, that's good. Did she suggest anything in particular?
Yeah, she recommended software called VVAT and said I should book up for a couple of practice sessions using VVAT.
Great. I'm sure you'll find them useful.
And, of course, the second target was to draw up a survey checklist, which
Yes, you emailed me it last week.
Have you had a chance to look?
Of course. I think it's good. Very much on the right lines. I'd say your first two sections are spot on. I wouldn't suggest that you change anything there, but in Section 3 you really do need to have questions on teaching experience.
Yeah, I was thinking that section looked a bit short.
Right.
And my third target was do further reading on discipline.
Oh, yes. I mentioned a couple of writers, didn't I?
Yes, well, I got hold of the Banerjee, and I thought that was excellent, but I'm afraid I didn't manage to get hold of the essays about classroom management. You know, the ones by Simon Erickson. The bookshop said it was out of print, and the library doesn't have a copy.
Oh, right. And I'm afraid I've lent my copy to another student. What I suggest you do is try the library again. This time apply for it through the service called Special Loans. Have you done that before? You're entitled to 6 books a year.
Yes, no problem. That's what I'll do.
So, lots of useful work done.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
So let's look at some new targets. We'll start by having a chat about your Chapter 1. I very much enjoyed reading it. Your written style is very clear, and you've included lots of interesting descriptions of education in your target area. I've just got a couple of suggestions for some additional work.
Of course. Could I just ask, what do you think I should call it?
Well, I'd go for something like context review. What do you think?
Well, short and to the point.
Exactly. Now, as regards specific areas to work on, I'd be quite interested to have a few more statistics about the schools in the different zones.
Oh, that wouldn't be a problem. I can get them from the internet.
Great. And although you did make a reference to quite a few different writers, I think you should aim to cite more works written later than 2000.
OK. That's more difficult, but I can try. When do you want that done by?
Oh, it's not urgent. I should aim for the end of term. But in the meantime, I think you should also be thinking about Chapter 2.
Should I be drafting it already?
No, but I think you should note down its main sections.
Yes. You know, I always find that the hardest part...
I always find it helpful to put some ideas on index cards.
Yeah.
And then you can sort them and even lay them out on the floor. It's a real help.
Well, I'll certainly try it.
Okay.
When would the deadline be for that?
My advice would be to get it done before you embark upon the research. You can always change it later if you need to.
OK, I'll get going on that then.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about the history of moving pictures. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Many believe that the story first began in America in 1877, when two friends were arguing over whether a horse ever had all 4 feet, or hooves, off the ground when it galloped. To settle the bet, a photographer was asked to photograph a horse galloping, and the bet was settled because you could see that all the hooves were off the ground in some of the photos. What was even more interesting was that if the photos were shown in quick succession, the horse looked like it was running. In other words, moving pictures. The person who became interested in taking the moving pictures to its next step was the famous American inventor Thomas Edison. Actually, he didn't do the work himself. News of the new system in America traveled fast, and a number of rival European systems started to appear once people had heard about it. The single problem with all the systems was they couldn't really project the film onto a screen, so more than one person could see it. Then, in 1895, 3 systems were all developed, more or less at the same time and independently of each other. I guess the most famous of these was by the Lumière brothers from France, and they called their system the cinematograph, which of course is where the word cinema comes from. There were also 2 brothers in Germany who developed a successful system, and they called it a bioscope. Well, now once the problem of projection had been solved, the next challenge for the inventors was to make the films longer and more interesting. A continuing problem at the time was that the films had a tendency to break when they were being played, a problem which was caused by the tension between the 2 wheels, or reels as they are called, which hold the film. Now, this problem was solved by 2 American brothers. They developed the Lantham loop, which was the simple addition of a 3rd reel between the 2 main reels. And this took all the tension away, with the result that the film stopped snapping. So now there was a real possibility of having films of more than 2 or 3 minutes. And this led to the making of the Great Train Robbery, the very first movie made. It only lasted 11 minutes, but was an absolute sensation. And there were cases of people watching the movie and actually fainting when the character fired a gun at the camera. Almost overnight, movies became a craze, and by 1905, people in America were lining up to see movies in store theaters, as they were called then. I guess the next big step in terms of development of technology was to have people actually talking on the film. And the first step towards this was in 1926, when sound effects were first used on a film. It wasn't until the following year, however, that the first talkie, as they were called then, was made. This film featured actors speaking only during parts of the film, and was called The Jazz Singer. And it wasn't until 1928 that the first all-talking film was produced, and this was called The Lights of New York. Unfortunately, the sound on this early film was not very good, and I believe they put subtitles on the film. That is, they printed the dialogue along the bottom of the film to compensate for this poor sound quality. Now, with the addition of sound, moving pictures became far more difficult to make.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. That is the